Yeah, so we are going to talk about CLI builders. So far, what I've come to find is that there's like 3 or 4 people that know builders pretty much in detail, and they happen to be on the Angular team. So I hope that at the end of all this, you at least understand what builders are, and maybe you can start to think about places where a builder could make sense in your project or in your company as a way to integrate with different systems and different build scripts that aren't necessarily part of an Angular process. So like Frosty said, my name is Mike Hartington. I work for a company called Ionic. I'm an Angular GDE. If you have any questions for me at any time during this, tweet me. Love to know what people are thinking. M Hardington on Twitter. And if you want to copy this link real quick, the slides are live right now, so you should be able to get everything that we're going to go over, as well as some video assets. So let's dive into it first by kind of understanding what a builder is, because if you survey a group of Angular developers and ask them, hey, do you know what builders are? Chances are they're going to say, aren't they those things that I call whenever I run a ng command? And this is kind of true. They're similar to that, but they are so subtly different. So if we were to isolate the characteristics of a builder to describe them, they're really this kind of mysterious behind-the-scenes aspects of the CLI. You don't interact with them directly, and you shouldn't really have to interact with them at all. Your CLI itself is what's going to be the one that is calling a builder and handling all of that. And they operate on this very simple principle that we'll see as we go forward. Now, we're already familiar with a handful of builders when we start a new Angular project. So whenever we go ahead and we run ng-build, well, what we're really running is the browser builder from Angular DevKit. When we go ahead and we run ng-serve, as the name hints at, we are running a dev server builder from DevKit. So we are just running this builder by running our CLI command. And the last one is whenever we run ng-test, we are running by default the Karma test runner, or we could swap that out for something like Jest. So the high-level ng commands don't actually know any of the implementation details. They just know run this thing, which will run a builder. Now, with all of these different kind of builders that we are interacting with, they operate on this very simple principle. Given a set of options, run this function, and then just return the results. There's nothing about a builder that says, build my app. And the name's kind of an unfortunate naming incident, but builder just knows, here are the options, here's the context of which I am running in. I'm going to do something with these options and then return something. Whatever that is, I don't know. So let's break this down real quick so that way we can see how all this comes together. So if we have a vanilla Angular project, we are just opening up our angular.json file. We're going to come up and look at this build object. Now, this is what we consider our architect. They're not an architect if we think about the real life equivalent. They aren't they're not into the details of how something gets built. They just describe the higher level ideas and design of what is going to get built. So when we run build, ng-build, or ng-run app:/build, this is the architect that we are calling. So we will call our architect, and then our architect is going to go through and say, hey, when I get called, execute this builder. Now, this builder is just going to go off, and we're pointing to the Angular DevKit package, and it's going to run the build Angular browser builder. So pretty simple look up there. We are going to get our options from the command lines and ones that we have hard-coded in the file. And then we're also going to provide some overrides for maybe if we're in CI or if we're doing a production build, we can start to modify certain options. So if this is how a builder operates in pretty much every single use case, let's go ahead and just make a builder to see how everything works. But I think it's first important to answer the question, why? So if you want to learn to build a builder, having a good use case and why you would want to add one is going to really help you figure out what you need to do next. If you have different tools like image optimization tasks that are based on NPM scripts, a builder can be a great way to integrate those tools into your Angular CLI project and have them feel like a much more natural part of your project. Plus, it's pretty cool to be able to know how to do something and then go to your team and say, hey, look what I figured out how to do. You don't know how to do that. I do. Job security. That's what we're all looking for. So our process so far for creating a builder is just to make a directory and do npm init or yarn init and create a package JSON. Now, instead of our package JSON, we're going to obviously give it a name, a version number, and then we're going to add this key called builders. So I was going to reference another JSON file, and we're going to call this one builders.json. Now, inside of our builders.json file, we are going to create a list of different builders. So here we have builders as a key, and inside of that, it has a list of other builders that we can work with. So for instance, this is our command builder. Here is the implementation for it. So this is what gets executed when we call the builder. This is a list of different options that we can pass to our builder. And then the CLI can use the schema to validate saying, hey, this is not a valid option that you passed. Fix that. And then to close it all out, we're just going to give it a description because we're good developers. We want to make sure our tools are basically self-documenting. Now, if we kind of piece this all together, we have the package JSON at the top, the builder.json in the middle, and then the key for our builder inside of our angular.json. So if we can see the lookup, we have the package name inside of the package JSON and then the angular.json. And then we have the builder name kind of doing this nice little lookup. So when we call @bionic builders, we are going to look at the package version. It's going to read our builder.json, and then we're going to call the builder that we're passing in after that colon. So let's take a look at the implementation detail and kind of understand how this is all working. So we'll create a file called command builder, and command builder is just going to have this default export of create builder. Now, the CLI operates on this standard principle of if you see a function that is exported called create builder, run it, and then it'll handle wiring up this whole entire process. So our default export of create builder will just get called by the CLI, and we're going to pass in as an argument a function that we are going to write ourselves. Now, this is the actual logic for our builder called command builder. Now, command builder gets two arguments here. We have an argument of options, which are just options coming in from the from our schema or from the angular.json, and then the context, which is the current running context that the builder is operating in. This is all kind of inherited from the CLI, so you should be able to get information like your workspace root, different builders that are also available to this particular project, and whatnot. Now, this is going to return a promise, but it's important to note that you don't actually need to return a promise. You could return an observable, or you could return, a synchronous method. Doesn't really matter, but what matters is that we are returning a value of build event. So let's go forward and expand on this. We are actually going to use node's child process and create this new process, grabbing a command and then some arguments from our options. So these are going to be things that users can set, and we're just going to spawn a new process. And from here on out, it's fairly typical node programming. Like we have process that standard out. Every time we get data, we're going to use context.logger.info, which is a standard node logging service to log out all that data and send it to string. Now, the important thing here at the end is that we are going to resolve our promise when the process has closed, and then we're just going to resolve with an object that has a key of success, and it's either going to be true or false based on the exit code. The exit code is 0, it's true, means everything has been successful. So without imports, obviously, we're at like 20-ish lines of code if we exclude the empty line on line number 2. Not too bad altogether. So let's go ahead and look at this in a live example. So I have my CLI over here, and I just have this angular.json package file, and I have the command builder set up right here. Obviously, here's the key that we will run, the architect. Here is our builder, where we're calling Bionic builders and then setting the custom build, so our lookup that we've learned. And then here are the different commands that we're going to run. So if we're going to just run ls and then pass in the flags -l and a whenever we do a normal build, but on a production build, we're going to use the tool cowsay and pass in the argument builders are cool. So let's just run this real quick. So we'll say ng run demo app command build Cool. So our builder has run. We're just listing out all the files inside of this directory. Now, if we were to run this again and then pass in the production flag, we're going to get a different output based on the tool cowsay. So this is how it works. Here's we have different options for production and for non-production use cases. And video just in case. But that's fairly simple. There's nothing in there that touches any of the build processes, and really there's no actual real life use case for that. What about something a little bit more complex that involves Webpack? Because as soon as you add Webpack to the mix, things get a little bit more complex. Well, let's dive into this and see what we can get. So starting off on the same kind of base that we had before, we have this create builder function, and we're going to pass in a new argument called extend builder. Now, in this case, it looks similar to our command builder. We have option and context getting passed in, and then we're going to return an observable of builder output. Now, from here, we're going to start to call different functions available from DevKit. And this first one is going to be target from target string. Now, target from target string is going to go ahead and take a builder name as an option or as an argument, and then return the different details about that builder. So it's going to give us the project, the target or the actual architect that we want to run, and then the configuration for this. So if it's production, CI, what have you. Once we have this target information, which we're going to call target spec, we're going to use it to get some more information from our project. So we'll use fork join, and we're going to call context.getTargetOptions and context.getBuilderName for target. So the first one is going to go through and get all the listed options in the angular.json. These could be things that whether or not we want to include certain files or certain assets to our builder. We're just going to get all those and return them to our current builder. From here, context.getBuilderName for target is actually just going to go ahead and get us the lookup or the builder key information here. So once we have the project, the architect, and then the configuration, we're just going to go ahead and get the builder key. So this would be something like Angular devkit / build Angular :browser. So it's that same kind of package lookup as before. And once we have both of these pieces of information, we're going to go ahead and pipe that into another function call from context called validate options. Now, validate options takes the options that we have in the workspace file and validates them against the schema. Now, a really great example of this is in a previous builder that I was working on, I didn't call validate options, and I was trying to figure out why a live reload server wasn't live reloading. Like any changes I made, it wouldn't reload. Well, it turns out there's an option on the dev server builder to disable live reload, because sometimes you wouldn't want a dev server to live reload, apparently. By just adding a call to validate options, I could validate the options from the workspace file against the internal options from the builder itself and get the complete picture of what are the defaults that I should be sending to this task and what are the ones from my that my user has set inside of their workspace file. So that's all well and good. We'll call that, it's a promise, so we'll use from to unwrap it and make it an observable. And then once we have that information, we'll get the finalized version of our options. And then we're going to call a function called extend build or extend builder. And this is something that we'll write in a moment. But what extend builder is going to do is going to take the default browser builder, and then we're going to use some currying to take that result or that builder and then pass in our finalized options and our context and modify what the default browser builder is doing. So this is a little advanced, and there are different ways to do this. This is just one that I tend to prefer. So what does extend builder look like? Well, extend builder, like I said, takes a builder as an argument. And then it's going to return our options and a context and modify the options and context from that original builder. So here we're calling our builder, which in this case is the default browser build option, browser build from DevKit. And we're going to pass in our normalized options, the original context, and then we're going to modify the third argument inside of execute browser builder for our transforms. Now this is going to be our Webpack configuration. And once we have access to this, we could just return the Webpack config and be happy, but we want to modify it and add a new plugin. There's plenty of plugins out there from Webpack's ecosystem. The one I am a big fan of is the ng-progress plugin, which will replace the standard out with a nice little ng cat. So with that all together, minus imports, we're at like 41 lines of code, and we're extending the existing builder in a pretty non-destructive way. So let's take a look at what that actually does. So the setup here, if we look at the angular.json again, we don't need the command builder. Here is our extend builder. We are passing in the builder that we want to call, so Bionic builders, extend build. And then the browser target here is just going to be our project name and then the actual task that we want to execute. So let's go ahead and just run this real quick. So we'll do ng run demo app extend build. And if everything goes well, we'll have a nice little ng cat going across the screen and the builder output would still work. So that's a little bit better than the default experience, and we get some Webpack goodness in there. That's pretty awesome. So again, let's kind of wrap up real quick because we're near the end of our time. What have we learned? In most part, I hope what you take away from this is that builders themselves aren't actually overly complicated. Again, that simple principle of here are some options, do something with them, if not, and then return some results. That's really all you need to know that about builders and what they actually do. The hard part about creating builders is figuring out what APIs you need and how to create the flow. So once you get an idea of the certain APIs you need, you can piece together everything in a kind of trial by error process. You know, most of them are going to come from the Angular DevKit package, and you're going to be reading a lot of type information from that. So I highly suggest, look at the actual build Angular browser or the browser builder from Angular DevKit / build Angular. It's roughly 820 lines of code, and that includes imports, utilities, and the most important thing about this is that there are types to follow. So if you get lost or aren't sure what to do, the types will guide you. There's also a lot of great examples out there in the ecosystem. Minko, if you go to his GitHub, has a whole example repo basically rebuilding the command builder. There is a collection of builders from this community called @AngularBuilders/custom webpack, which allows you to pass in a additional webpack and have it merged into the internal webpack config. Manfred obviously has his ngx build plus, and then Angular Schools has their CLI deploy target builder for deploying to GitHub pages. All different ways that you can do this. And I'd be remiss if saying, look at the one that I wrote for Ionic, Ionic Angular Toolkit. It has the same kind of concepts and actually uses that extend builder example. So evaluate if builders are going to be something that you need to know. Honestly, most people do not need to know this information. If only just to understand how tools work, most people aren't going to be writing their own builders. But if you're in that use case where you need to include different tasks that are outside of Angular, a builder can be a great way to do it. And there's going to be millions of ways to write the same builder. So don't get discouraged if what you saw here doesn't end up being the same as what you've written before.